Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Black Hoodie Alchemy, and happy Halloween season to you. We're in the thick of it now. I hope you've kept up on some of your horror movie action, and not just gone for the blood and guts, although that's fun too, but found some real existential mind fucks out there. Horror movies, man, when they twist the right way, they're some of the biggest just head scratchers that you can come across. That's why I love horror movies so much. It's a shock factor, not just visceral, but when it's intellectual as well. It's just like, what more could you ask for if you like a little bit of adrenaline, without fighting monsters and serial killers yourself?
Inside yourself.
No kidding. Yeah. And those are some kind of things we'll be talking about today. This is the show itself is kind of like all year Halloween vibes. Not exclusively, but it's definitely got that dark undertone. But so I would have this conversation any time of year, but the fact that it lines up right now with my buddy Keats Ross it's really perfect timing, because even just the name Haunt Manual, it's not indicative of Halloween, but when you take it in the context of what Halloween sort of represents on that archetypal level, it couldn't be more seamless, really. And for anyone that hasn't heard, if you like it, you can go check out the guest spot I did on the Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable. We talked about Halloween a little bit there, and just overall, the context of just the simple astrological implications, like astrology just being the philosophy of astronomy, and seeing how the seasons around us affect us so much and have become ceremonialized and ritualized in our cultures throughout history. Regardless of whether or not, like, however atheist we are or what lean we have, we all follow these patterns. And the pattern we're getting into now is that pattern of, like transmogrification. It's like, it's the tarot death card. Everything is getting colder. It's probably getting snowier depending on where you are. And, the time for harvest is either now or in some cases, or is just passed. So we're all hunkered down, waiting out the winter, either metaphorically or literally. It tends to come this time of season one way or another. And when you hunker down like that, you tend to think about just things in general more, but especially the past and nostalgia. And that's a lot of what holidays in general seem to be about, because nostalgia is a double-edged sword too. And before we get too much deeper into that, I want to introduce my buddy Keats Ross to the show. Thanks for coming aboard, man.
I really appreciate it, man. And thank you again for being so patient with me, rescheduling so much because of the crazy stuff that we're about to talk about has been kind of generating. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, no problem. No problem. Keats and I have known each other for a hot minute now. When were you born? Was it the 23rd or like the 25th?
Yeah, I'm the 23rd.
23rd of February. That's right. And I was born the 22nd. So we're Pisces twinsies. But I very much feel cut from the same cloth. And Keats has done his own show for a while now, intermittently, called Pragmagick. And you can find that on streaming platforms. And he's a musician under the name Dakota Slim. We'll play some of that music at the breaks throughout the show. I've played a little bit of it here in the past. It's very like dark folk bluesy. I love it. It's right up my alley. And you've always been like you've always been an artist from a variety of different angles and outlets. And most recently, you've been working on this multimedia sort of project, and it's called Haunt Manual, which is a little bit of a handshake with Hunt Manual there, which is the book I put out last Halloween.
It is. And just to sidebar a little bit, when we've talked about Hunt Manual, I was mishearing you, and I thought you were saying Haunt Manual, and I was like, damn, that's such a good title, Haunt Manual, because it really encapsulates a lot of the different multitudes of things that I work in. And so yeah, I cheekily, put it in the back of my mind. And then when I was ready to birth it, to me, all of these titles are kind of tentative in a sense,
Mhm.
because this will be collected into a publication. So who knows what it will be when that comes out. But yeah, Haunt Manual just, stayed with me. It echoed and I kept it. And you were the first person I wrote to. It was like, hey, you'll get a kick out of this.
Yeah, and it's great. I love it. It does, it adds a little bit of fun insider context knowing that, and just standing alone, it definitely encapsulates the what you're trying to convey with it.
Right.
And so I want to get into this because what the like the Halloween time, fall going into winter psychologically represents is, I'm saying, this kind of purgative quality, and it doesn't have to be all evil. That's kind of the point of investigating this stuff is, you separate the like more vile aspects of humanity from the wounded children, whether
Right.
that be sociologically or psychologically. And because all these things are in the uh reflected, encapsulated in the shadow. The shadow is just that which we have not fully come to terms with yet. So
Yeah.
and I was talking about nostalgia a little bit. I kept thinking about that word going through Haunt Manual, and I've always been fascinated by that word because it's such a powerful, like, nostalgia is sort of just, it's like a self-activated spell. We
Oh,
just
I've hated
fall.
it.
Yeah.
It's an absolute cancer,
Yeah.
at least to what I thought, for a long time. And I think that's a lot of the treatise of what I'm working with is, there's, these polar opposites inside of me. When you talk about Halloween,
Hmm.
being kind of this very pensive, I don't want to say brooding, but it is kind of it is a tucker down kind of time.
Hmm.
For me as a kid growing up in the Southwest, it's quite the opposite. Um, as far as the harvest was concerned, there really was none anyway. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, and the idea was, throughout my life, it has been this time of year that has granted me the most bounty. Whereas spring, funny enough, has granted me kind of the most sorrow or heartache. So I'm on the other polarity with this, in where, I've always been kind of entrenched in the deep ponderances of the other, and, you know, death, this kind of casual understanding of, our culture or many cultures during this time, coming to grips with what they probably think is an absolute, right? But it isn't in and of itself, because nothing is really absolute. And
Hmm.
so I just find it interesting that it's the one time where, like, in the somatic realm we all share, especially in this culture, people start to dance with the idea, um, that there is an essence, beyond whatever this mortal coil is, and it becomes kitschy and it becomes slightly like goofy and infantilized, and I love it. I love the macabre being taken down to that peg, and normalized in that sort of way, because it's true, it should be. We should all be very comfortable with the inevitable, you know. Just because it's inevitable, it doesn't mean it's absolute, or it doesn't mean it's a finality. So,
No
yeah.
doubt. Yeah. And I think Halloween has over time become sort of this counterculture holiday where
Hmm.
it's even encouraged, like, even for the most straight-laced people, to just kind of raise a little bit of hell, even if that means a wild costume in one way or another. And
Fire it up. Fire
yeah.
it up.
I love that. I think yeah, I think that's very telling. It's a very human need where even if you have some sort of belief system that is potentially geared towards, I don't know, just kind of shooing that stuff away,
Right.
it inevitably comes out, and I think it has to. It's sort of, the way I look
It's
at
a
it is,
Yeah.
what you go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's a cultural easing into
Hmm.
it. It's like, an allowance to kind of think of these things with other, you know, many do not want to ponder. Many do not want to be, kind of wrestling with those sorts of other side of the moon kind of,
Yeah.
interests, right?
Yeah.
And there is like just a casual allowance about it during this year, and it is very synchronous with the season, and it's working with that, that almost hangover from summer,
No
and that,
kidding.
October burn of the kind of the the side eye and the weariness of the winter that's about to come. It really is all connected, and I feel like as humans, especially as pattern makers, we are absolutely filling those holes and fitting those situations as a form of like interpersonal comfort with each other too. So yeah,
No doubt.
I think it's quite beautiful, but it can also be, not so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a good way. This is where my mind goes, and I think this is a good way to encapsulate what we've talked about so far, and especially what is to come. We're talking more about Haunt Manual. I look at this kind of work, the inner work, the shadow work, as something like. So they say that part of the reason, among other things, why we dream is because it is the like just sheer adaptational overload of data, and it's a way
Mhm.
for our brains to sort of just process and gauge things and systematize things as best as it can, and
Right.
even if that's symbolic. And they so if we weren't able to do that as suggested, especially by sleep deprivation, and if we weren't
Mhm.
able to, like, whether or not you remember your dreams, if you weren't able to activate and engage in REM sleep, we would just slowly start to lose our minds, because that's a crucial place for us to process and systematize and like incubate thoughts and ideas and data and emotions
Yep.
and
The
things.
bleed through, the great
Right.
bleed. Yeah.
Right. And if we don't do that psychologically in our own lives, then yes, the great bleed through. Yeah.
Mhm.
With like we have to take that time to um nurse ourselves and those nostalgic inclinations, because nostalgia is a very powerful thing. And I think it's very, it's something like intuition. I don't even, one could probably argue that they might be stemming from the same thing or whatever, but
Yeah.
either
I
way.
would suffice to say nostalgia is the opiate of the masses, honestly. I wouldn't, I'm sure there's many opiates of the masses, but the way I'm handling it, and something that for all my vices and self, masturbatory inclinations, like nostalgia was just something that, I come from a very Dharma bum kind of background where if something doesn't work out, I burn it down, build again somewhere else. And it was kind of chasing that encapsulated ghost and not thinking of, the sentimentality, or really digesting, as you said, or even subconsciously, just because I was so active and pushing through it, I wasn't allowed the digestion. I wasn't allowed the permeance of what ailed me at that time, or the causation of trauma, or the bad handed follow throughs, or any of that. So nostalgia, I feel, when I finally kind of, and I call it nostalgia mancy as a kind of tongue in cheek, and I like my kitschy portmanteaus. I'm a sucker for 'em, but it's not really, I wouldn't say it's really nostalgia mancy, but nostalgia was definitely the door. It was when I allowed myself to meditate heavily on certain periods of time that I've otherwise tried to burn or move past. And yeah, that was the key, that unlocked a lot of things, was not just the sentimentality of it, but the allowance of the rush of familiarity, like an otherworldly familiarity, even somewhat of a deja vu like familiarity, nostalgia
Mhm.
for things that haven't happened yet, or nostalgia for things that might have in dream states or whatever. Like I used to just I used to just burn through them. I push through them, because I, inherently, I think I'm a very sentimental and sensitive person. And so once you let that floodgate open, all hell breaks loose. So I
Yeah.
had to figure out a way to parse it. I had to figure out a way to, tithe it here and there. And, through the practice or whatever, I'm jumping ahead, but that was my ability to kind of let nostalgia through little by little without being just overwashed in a tundra of, toils.
Yeah, because you're talking about very practical things here. We're high-minded things with practical implications. Like
Mm-hmm.
you in like throughout your works and your podcasts have explored um what's the best way to put it? Like mysticism and magic as therapy, and what those implications actually mean. And as far as I'm concerned, unless you're, going some real Aleister Crowley hedonist
Mm-hmm.
style path, like that's what it's all about to begin with. Is
Right.
yeah. So and
I mean, I could break it down even just simpler than that. Art,
right,
art is the
amen.
most pragmatic magic known to me, at least. I mean, it's the one thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. It's the one thing that puts my hat on straight. It's the thing that keeps the other of brain chemistry, something that is, not always under my control, and the inability to commune with it is, been a barking kind of disaster throughout life. But, you know, there's nothing more magical than, just getting into that state with creation. And I think to me, that's it's a very simplified, but, to me, astounding realization of, just how simple magic truly is.
100%. It, I feel like it really helps inform that sort of mentality coming from some sort of a punk rock background,
Hmm.
because it's extremely DIY, it's extremely grassroots. It's I don't need interpretation, from a priest class.
Hmm.
um, and that's another reason you and I get along so well. And you remind me a lot of my friend Justin Otto. I'm gonna have to introduce you guys somehow at some point. You both
I
do
think you
podcast.
said that last time you were on
Really?
my show, actually. Yeah, yeah.
That
I
would
think
surprise me.
I subscribed to him. It was like a Dharma podcast of some sort, right?
Yeah, Dharma Junkie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
If you guys both did podcasts, you guys do I love your shows. And you guys do it kind of intermittently, which I also respect.
Yeah.
And if you guys did either
That's
one
a nice way to
consistently
put
and
it.
but yeah, one of these days I'll get you guys talking. You guys would have a good time. But
Yeah.
he's
With the intermittent thing too, that was the other is, I used to be so hard on myself for the consistency. And I think those are, again, it's through trying to find this third mind of these like really heavy polarized beingness in me that I've had since I was a kid. Just, really enjoy the extremes, of spontaneity, but also, I'm obsessive about finding systems and things to incorporate spontaneity. You know what I mean? Or like block schedule spontaneity. It never works, by the way. But you know what I mean? And it at first, everything tells you, right? Like the machinations of the world tell you that you are just a feedback loop. Like your resonance is just eating itself, in that way. And this, jokingly kind of call it hauntomancy, right? But that gets deeper into. We'll go into that later. Again with my kitschy portmanteaus, but like everything tells you, you can't exist as a third point on this very fine line. But the point doesn't need to be on the axis. I've realized it can be off. It can be off the axis, and it'll crease the other sides of the polarities, right? Almost like
Mhm.
the therefore symbol, which I am obsessed with. But the idea is it's been battling against like what I've been told, what I've been kind of conditioned in like roads and this, societal structure have told me that I am just a like Tasmanian devil of, you know, uh, reckless abandon, right? Or like unable, the inability to grow, or inability. Sorry, that was a stumble. But the inability to grow because it's feeding like off each other so much that there's no room to build the scaffolding, right? And to raise. And I'm finding through this, like that's actually, I'm finding the superpower and having those polar constructs of self. And all of this really has been trying to find that third mind, and it's the macro and the micro of like, even through my artistic process to, my just beingness in a, you know job needing world or whatever. And so it that has really opened my eyes as far as being so uh reluctant, I think, to, or like, I wouldn't say reluctant. I think I was just I was unable to hear myself, or unable to like allow myself to, the I'm too self-deprecating, right? It was always like, oh, it's got to be me. It's, I'm at fault for, I'm keeping myself back. Well, that it was very true, but it wasn't for the reasons that I think I was programmed to think. And I'm finding these like what I considered curses are actually superpowers have honed a bit, not to be that like goofy or woo woo, but you know what I mean? Like
Totally, I feel you.
they're actually like these, you know, the resonance is stronger, because resonance, we all inherently resonate at a frequency, but resonance is the first one, especially in like gain staging or, audio production. Resonance is the one that gives you the feedback. And I always thought that was so interesting that everything inherently, almost like psychoacoustically, carries its own resonance, but it's the first one to eat itself too, if not tethered correctly, or if not, aligned correctly. And using that same metaphor, I always thought, well, it's adjusting this, adjusting that, adjusting this, when really it's just kind of a placement of self, moving yourself away from the echo of, whatever life speaker is in front of you. This metaphor is just falling in on itself, but
I
I
really
think my
like it though.
point,
It's good.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely lands the point, no doubt.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I want to ask you specifically about Hungry Ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
But
Prenta,
first,
yeah.
lay the context a little bit. Like for anyone that doesn't know you, we've been
Oh,
talking
don't
for a
ask me to
little bit.
elevator pitch. Don't ask me to elevator pitch, please.
No, no elevator pitch. But like I want you to um let people in on some of your inner process. Like what are the things I know a little bit, but some of your inspirations that, some of the things that have informed your investigations the most, just with like philosophy and magic and esotericism in general.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, that's a very taut line, even back to when I was a kid. Again, with the polarities, this will be a contradiction has been my favorite word. It used to be like the you know the sacred whatever demon not to be called, you know. But contradiction is, to me, is been, as I've been saying, has become my, almost like my favorite part of myself, like these
Hmm.
big
I
extremes.
can
And
relate.
it comes also too from set and setting and nature and nurture. And nurture was, my parents divorced when I was, I don't even think 3 years old. I think I only saw them in my life in the room once together, you know.
Wow.
So I, as many kids do in that relationship, they live with their mother, and my mother decided to, you know, stay out in the desert, in the barrios of like New Mexico, or actually this around this time it was Arizona. And so I was there pretty much for what I would say the Gulf Stream, of my childhood, but I'd have these pockets, these synapses where I would visit my father, who, um, my mother being kind of from a Sicilian and Irish kind of Catholic upbringing, very strict, but like not attentive, really never there. Bless her heart, I don't mean that in any kind of judgment.
No, I
That's
feel
just what
you.
it was. As a latchkey kid out in the 120-degree weather or whatever. Uh, but I split that, from this very like alienating, literally deserted kind of place, to visit my father, who was around Robert Anton Wilson, staying at Marilyn Ferguson's compound, who wrote the Aquarian Conspiracy, and who actually um, create or co-created or published, I should say, the Brain Mind Bulletin, of which was collected into a book called Pragmagick, which is what my podcast is an homage to. Um, and my father had this like talk show back in the early '90s, and yeah, Robert Anton Wilson was on. All these people, supposedly, I bounced on Timothy Leary's knee.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's one of
Wow.
my father's you know anecdotes. I forget, there was something Timothy Leary said about me, but I always forget it. Something
That's pretty
nice.
cool though. Right on,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Well, and
Um,
that's the thing. So, I'd be just enamored with the openness. I was asking my father, about the soul. Um, I don't know. It's 6 years old. Like I've just always been absolutely akin to the other, of like wondering what is this whole tether about? Like, where does love come from? Like, what's driving us?
mhm.
And go back with my mom, and it'd be very an abusive stepdad, and me kind of raising my sister. So those polarities, those that's pretty much the scaffolding of which built my system as I know it. And as I said, that micro and the macro of that, it makes perfect sense. I finally had to move away from my mother's, from a second stepfather and I getting into a fist fight, as you
Mhm.
do, um, and had to move in with my father at like 13 or 14. And it was funny. It was like, felt out of place. It was just this constant outsiderdom. And I think within that, even when you think you found kind of a community or a familial place, there was this ghost, quite literally, of myself that I could see, um, standing ajar, of a kind of a common chord of groups and things and people. And I think that's what kind of built me into kind of burrowing into myself, and then into music, um, learning how to, speak through writing, learning how to kind of communicate through art, and finding myself in that way. And, always been a long time comic fan since I was a kid, pretty,
Hmm.
pretty die hard.
Hell
And,
yeah.
with that begets chaos magic. And, I think my father had this tiny library, like really tiny, in the attic. It's like where he hid his, kind of more, I wouldn't say racy, but not the kind of books you want to show, your wife's friends over.
Right.
There, Satanic Bible in
Right. I
there,
feel you.
the Book of Enoch, H.P. Lovecraft stuff. The Necronomicon was one, and I would
Ooh.
just find myself just immersed in reading all of this stuff. And you know, I never the funny thing is that the tethers to like Robert Anton Wilson and all of that stuff when I was a kid really kind of came up after I became very vocal about um working within this kind of shift, right? This I wouldn't call it a niche, but you know what I mean, the metaphysically minded kind of artistic stuff.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because like I just didn't realize it until you know it came around again. It's like, oh yeah, I remember the cosmic trigger. Yeah, it's autographed. I'm like,
Nice.
oh
Yeah, I
yeah, it's
feel you.
yeah, and so it's that was kind of the I think the genesis of this idea of remembering and this weird kind of future casting that happens, I think, throughout life, and this cyclical, kind of stumbling, hitting a almost like a deja vu path, and you're like, holy shit, yeah, I was on this trail, you know, 15 years ago, and here I am again, kind of unintentionally. And and that I remember the Disinfo Book of Lies was a big thing for me when I was a teenager because it was a compendium, right? You know, it had Genesis Peorage. It had, you know, um, Austin Osman Spare topics. It had, uh, you know, Grant Morrison, opens it up with that pop magic, uh, very famous, teaching you the kind of spare method of creating a sigil. And so, I think a lot of people share that same genealogy of,
Yeah.
especially when it comes through, as you said, I wouldn't characterize it by genre punk, but it was definitely by ethos, like coming at things from a punk rock, you know, kind of ethos,
No
especially when it
doubt.
came to magic and it came to these highfalutin, you know, big academic, big philosophical ideas. Of course, the entire time, I was reading Derrida was someone I really got into, kind of conjointly, but didn't connect the dots yet. It was odd. I was feasting upon all of these, interwoven tethers and splinters, and just hadn't kind of quite put the meal together yet. And just to move through that, traveled all over playing music and was a writer. Fell in and out of love 800 times. Had one too many mental breakdowns. Did way too many harmful things to myself. Had a lot of mental health struggles. Um, and it was after the last, I think, really deep kind of drug abandon and sorrow and kind of end of the ropes at a dilapidated apartment on this weird off year in Arizona, which is, the mother of all of my trauma was this state. And I found myself there when, 25 or 26. And I just kind of gave up the ghost and went with what everybody, I think, expected me to do, which was he's just going to become some weirdo drug addict somewhere. He keeps reading those Burroughs books. This is what he's going to turn out to be. And and that's
I
kind of
feel
like
you, man.
what,
I
yeah.
definitely feel you.
And it wasn't because of Burroughs or anything. Like I actually wasn't really a drug user until I think my mental health or my mental disfluencies really started to rear their head. I think in my early 20s was when they started to really come up, when brain chemistry started to become something that became very, at that time, became very apparent that I had little to no control over, you know? And so here were these substances that you can just take a quick licking and, go about your day.
Right.
Something in your pocket that you can actually control to change your environment inside yourself, right? So yeah,
It's
um,
powerful. Yeah.
yeah, but in this dilapidated apartment in you know Arizona, pretty much at the end of my wing, I remember I wasn't doing magic at the time. I had been far too distracted. I'll put it that way. Um, I I wrote um kind of a treatise about, if I survive this, uh, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to study. This is what I'm going to get back into, because I was always talking about it. It was always in my mind, but I really wasn't practicing at that time because I was so, involved in other kind of hedonistic, bullshit. Um, but if it wasn't because of that, I wouldn't have kind of given myself over uh, to it. And um, I did some ritualistic stuff, more like chaos magic-y kind of things to help me with withdrawal, to help me kind of get on my feet. And I remember learning how to like basically walk again after withdrawal and like feeling the air on my skin like a newborn infant that just like crowned a womb.
Wow.
It was like this very much a rebirth, like a baptism in atmosphere. And obviously, I didn't learn my lesson right then, but it took me a couple more stumbles, but nothing that bad, right?
Right, right.
But
I feel
what
you.
birthed from that was the consistency of utilizing uh, different metaphysically minded things to kind of create and to edge myself away from those harbingers of harm. So I would say that time in 2011 was pretty much like the kind of the birth of, I would say maybe like the how it, like before birth, that liminal space in the womb,
Yeah.
before like really doing it. But that's the genesis for sure. And ever since then, it had been accruing, and it's gotten me, you know I've gone mad, you know, with it. I've gone uh exhilarated by it. I've hated it. I've thrown it. I've cursed it. I've, you know, um been impassioned by it. But I never once kind of deified it in the sense of like my only uh kind of communion to the other. That makes sense? Like I
What
always
magic in
used it
and of
as,
itself?
yeah. Yeah, I always used it as a tool, almost as a kind of like a prism of that communion and experimentation and,
Agreed. I
getting,
also, again, couldn't
yeah.
relate to you more there. That's exactly how I see it too. Because I'm not like
Yeah.
an, and neither are you, like, or rephrase that. We are both not orthodox, like robe sitting people with
No.
like, we have specific sigils that we're putting around all the time. But I mean, like, what
Oh, you
we
mean like
definitely,
from like traditional currents and all that? No.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I have my own sigils I put everywhere all the time.
Right. See, they're very, very punk rock of you.
are doing the will of our true self, we are inevitably doing the will of the universe. In magic, these are seen as indistinguishable. That every human soul is in fact one human soul. It is the soul of the universe itself, and as long as you are doing the will of the universe, then it is impossible to do anything wrong.
Thousands of people are having paranormal experiences with ghosts, demons, shadow people, dogmen, Bigfoot, and more. Their stories need to be told, and they are being told. Dark Waters, the renowned storyteller, invites you to join at IamDarkWaters.com. For just a few dollars a month, you can listen to some of the most hair-raising and compelling stories on the planet. You'll have access to real-life stories told by Dark Waters, thousands of hours of content. Their encounters are being told, and told by the best, at IamDarkWaters.com. Listen to stories like The Rabbit Man, the Dogman encounter in Silas, Alabama, The Man with No Face, The Other Woman, A Day Ahead of the Devil, Dogman Murder in Hurricane Ida, even a story of someone trying to kill a dogman. Louisiana water demon stories. Sign up today and become a member at IamDarkWaters.com. That's IamDarkWaters.com.
Musicians experience a lot of frustration with music marketing and promotion. They have no idea how to get their music heard, and they're spending hours sending emails, making phone calls, and hitting up their friends to promote them. With our industry-powered digital marketing platform, we can set up your media plan in minutes. Our team will automatically distribute your music across all the best channels, so you can focus on actually making the music. Submit your music today on our website at mymusicpromoter.com. That's mymusicpromoter.com.
Listen, as we explore the mysteries of the universe, the unknown, high strangeness, consciousness, and our human potential. Lighting the Void is an eclectic program that strives to ignite the late night with stimulating conversations. Join us on The Fringe FM.
And also, before I forget, just because Eric Millar has been on the show, and it was a great time, and he is a great philosopher and artist himself. And I met you first, and then I met Eric, but you two were friends, and then I met you both, and so you guys have known each other for a long time, and you guys are both just not tooting your horn, man, but you guys are both just some of the best people. I could just like talk with you guys for hours.
I appreciate that, for sure. And feelings mutual. And as for Eric, I never met somebody that I just clicked on an artistic level to where we, in a weird way, there was this kind of almost phantom-like understanding of, you do this, I do that, we'll find that third mind. Like every single time. It's gotten to the point where his last book that he just put out, the disparate parts, which
I got to get into that. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's kind of my favorite part because it takes away a lot of the, kind of pomp and circumstance of like narrative structures, and just gives you these bite-sized 1-2 punches of, I think I would say a shared philosophy I have with him. But I was, batting back and forth ideas as I was writing Haunt Manual and he was writing that, and we were just in tune. And it would be like, fuck, do I have to change this? Because now it sounds like each other up. You know what I mean? It got to the point where it was kind of uncomfortable how just how well parallel we were.
That's a good partner right there, at least. Yeah. That's a great problem to have if you want to have some synergy.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's cool, man. All right, so man, and that is, I appreciate you sharing all that, because that's powerful stuff. And not only does that sort of inform the listener a little more, but it also articulates in just some of the core themes that I try to highlight, like all throughout this show, is practical magic, like all these high-minded concepts. None of this means fuck at all, unless we can bring it into our day-to-day lives and we can see some sort of tangible results from them.
Sure.
And
Yeah, and I
that's
get
not to
the
say
right. I was gonna say, yeah, I get the exorcism of want and need too, like of enjoying the process of ritualized things. I find myself, whether I like it or not, that's what I have to kind of come to terms with, and I've just gotten so obsessed less with the result. I think I got really cushy about just being really excited about experimenting with, my forms of audiomancy, or like, all these different weird constructs of just blowing shit up and putting it back together, and having these really insane experiences and being like, what did I just open? Did I fuck up? Like, what am I doing? Like a baby with a loaded gun, and different
Mhm.
things. But that's what like really excites me about it, is that kind of keen need to just be within that almost hypnagogic state of creation, of experimentation, of implementation.
Yeah, I think that is
Yeah.
a good point to make because I say like I try to emphasize results based a lot of times because it is the most which is just the
Well, it's the
empirical
most
approach.
useful.
Yeah, but results based is kind of a tricky phrasing because I don't always mean um A to B in the
Sure.
sense of, because it's sometimes it works like that. You can, but it's not always that linear. And a lot of the time it's the like what I suspect without knowing all the details, it kind of helped you in your recovery process, because I can relate to that in my own ways as well. Like just the routine of it and the act itself of the meditation, the sigils, whatever you used in the chaos magic sense, that becomes the anchor. It's not so much even a lot of times the casting there out. It's seeing that there's some sort of giving yourself some sort of psychological backbone,
Yeah.
because I think that, kind of with the whole dive manual thing, the metaphor being like just drowning out at sea, like unless you have building blocks for your psyche to work with,
Hmm.
then you're just going to be adrift, because people think that the psyche and the imagination is just this, I don't know, they just think it's this fluffy
Right.
non-existent thing. But just because it's not like tangible in the sense that this microphone in front of me is, doesn't mean that it doesn't have serious implications in the real and tangible
Right.
present world,
And to bring it back to resonance, right? Doesn't
yeah,
mean that it doesn't resonate in this shared somatic reality too. I
right.
think that was, that's the biggest thing. And I've had my, you know, since then, like tons of trials and tribulations, within the construct of experimenting, right? Of mistaking resonance maybe for, a malignance, I don't know. But you know what I mean? And it's
Hmm.
not so much, it's funny too, because yeah, I think you're with me in this. It's that it's not so much that I need to believe them, it's just that there's enough folks that do in our shared psychic sphere that they just are now. You know?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
these things, And yeah, I went through the like went through that time. It was August 21st of, was it 22nd? Yeah, it was 21st was the totality of the Oregon eclipse, like the big eclipse of that year in
Oh yeah, yeah.
2017. And that's what starts basically the journey I'm on right now, and that's what like Haunt Manual was all about, because during that time I was not in a bad drug way or anything, but having to deal with, you know, not extremes, right? Like this
Right.
low ancient hum of disappointment and, regret, not knowing, it's like I don't know how to react to, a wallowing whimper. I know how to react to, a gut punch, but I was in a dissolving relationship, and, things were all tumbling out of place. And I decided to go out with a friend, and we camped in the Oregon wilderness. And I brought with me all of my tools of that time. And I meditated for 2 days, and I concocted this insane ritual, which I, to this day, like, I've written about at points, but I am, knowing what I know now, like, absurdly embarrassed about. For some of the things, just, it was literally like, as you were saying, I did not have the scaffolding. I was not prepared for the tower card that was about to come.
Wow.
Even
I
though,
feel you.
and when that hum dulled, when the circadian rhythm of, the world went quiet under that eclipse, I performed this ritual, and afterwards, like, was a severe and fierce, you want things to change? Well, everything's gonna fucking burn down. But guess what? If you stick it out, it will build up better. So that was, like, to me, that was the big calling card for me, I think, in different currents of magic, and different tried and true, very charged by generations of people. Like, I don't need to fuck with that shit. You know what I mean? Unless I'm, like, well versed, or, I have like a second generation hoodoo practitioner, dear friend, and, I will be in those rituals sometimes, but with him, and within the guidance of stuff, of the current and the culture. But, the smorgasbord of shit that I was pulling in from for that ritual was just, yeah, it was inviting a lot of, I think, resonance, right?
No doubt.
From, like, a shared sonic weapon of, like, minds across, time, just beaming right through me in a very cataclysmic way. But at the
It's
same time, it proved to me that, like, holy shit, there is a communion I need to have, but there's
exactly.
also a reverence I need to have, and I can't just be punk rock about, this shared communion of, currents and of cultures and shit. I need to be, keep the ethos, but, be respectful. And I think that was a big lesson.
Yeah, it's the fool's journey, and I mean that in the best possible sense of the word, because so many people are afraid to take certain leaps, and
Mm-hmm.
because they're afraid they might bite off more than they can chew. And yeah, sometimes inevitably people in general are just going to sometimes bite off more than they can chew, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. Sometimes that means, if anything, I guess, be prepared for whatever collateral, just be prepared for as best you can. But I really don't think that means that you shouldn't do it. And
Right, absolutely. I think, for me, that was the lesson. I was really deep into a few different currents at the time. I don't know if you know this about me, but I like, playing instruments with every finger and elbow and shoulder at the same time, sort of thing. And that was, yeah, that's what I meant was, if you're not giving, these things the certain reverence they deserve, yeah, please do them, but, like, don't, you know just
don't tread lightly,
lackadaisically, just,
or
yeah.
tread lightly, or whatever,
Well, yeah,
be
whatever, yeah,
careful.
stumble
Be
into it.
careful.
What's funny is, like, I don't even know why I'm telling people, to not do that, because, yeah, the burn was hard and swift, but, that is what's put me on my journey to now.
But I mean,
And
it's a fair warning. I mean, Jung
yeah,
himself even gave the warning. It's like, seriously, tread lightly. This is
yeah,
uncharted territory, because even if someone else can relay to you their experiences, they're not going to be quite the same as what you will experience. So,
right,
brace yourself. But that's the alchemical process. There's so much on the other side, and you can't get to the other side without that plunge.
yeah.
So, um, And some people do it bit by bit a little more, and some people like you and me we really go for it. We go for the whole enchilada.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
I mean, why not?
I had a dream the other night, and it's kind of set me on this other path. I'm supposed to finish the conclusion to this haunt manual chapter, and now I'm writing like this subchapter that'll come out before, because speaking of dreams, I had this dream, and it was this very kind of authoritative. I felt for the first time in this dreamscape, like not in a fascistic way, but like I was in an authoritative stance, a very confident kind of opinion of myself.
Mhm.
And by that I mean there wasn't an air that made me look sideways or rethink a thought. Like I felt like this sheer confidence. And I remember there was a patch on my shoulder, and the patch it had a therefore symbol, which if folks don't know, it's basically a triangle just made of dots, the three dots. It's used in mathematics as a kind of a logical therefore, but there's other meanings to it. It also signifies ruins, or historical sites on map keys,
Hmm.
and it's a symbol that I've been using forever, specifically for that, like the symbol of detritus, the symbol of ruins. Um, but in it was this funny little ghost, like a little sheet ghost kind of cartoon in the middle of this triangle, and the words around it were dissolve, echo, and resonate. And that's why I'm bringing up uh resonate all the time, or resonance all the time, is because this is it's been driving me mad for the last few days, just how um haunted in a good way like I am by this dream. And so I woke up and I immediately kind of did a crude sketching of the patch of this, the symbol. And then I thought about the words, dissolver, echo, resonar, like a kind of a Spanish spin on it. And, that has kind of become this motto to me in a way that fits that perfect mold of like the two extremes of dissolve and resonate, right? And in the middle is echo. It's that third mind. And it's just it all is so synchronous to each other about these polarities, and finding that dot off the axis to, commune with those two extremes, but not, to be dead center of agreeing with both or being both, if that makes sense. It's
Mhm.
like, because in a triangle, obviously the tall point, it has cascading lines. It's you can kind of choose to fall any other way, but you're not stuck stagnant in between. And yeah, that's really sung to me about all of this treatise about fall, and working with magic, and this the as above so below, right? It's like it's just so I'm in this place where everything has been echoing or resonating, or the dissolution of what I thought, or who I thought I was before, or the machinations of where I thought I'd be, or how do I get out of this. And it's like it's not an ego death, and I don't mean that. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Mhm.
not talking about that kind of disillusion. I'm talking about like the disillusion of uh just outside, almost kind of nature or natural kind of machinations within yourself that keep you prideful, or like that keep you um begging to be on this sushi boat going around the bend.
Yeah, trying to get in tune with the Tao.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And and we the Hollowed, our collective, uh our common phrase is haunt on. And
Mhm.
I would say, to me, like the only way, and it's cheeky, but like the only way to truly achieve immortality, quote unquote, is through art and ideas, right?
Amen.
Not in the transhumanism. Forgive me, haven't really pierced that stone yet. But so I've spent too much time in the woods in the past few months. But
In general, because we've been dabbling, like it's been an elongated explanation of them both. So it'll be in some ways kind of a bow on top, although we're not quite done with the conversation yet. But if you could articulate for people, what do you mean by a little kitschy term, hauntomancy? And
yeah.
then what is, especially in this context, what is a hungry ghost?
Yeah, so I'll start with the hungry ghost. So
Cool.
hungry ghost from the Bardo Thodol, hearing through the Bardos, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There's the realms of the afterlife are separated by bardos, or kind of realities or layers, or however you actually want to perceive them. I perceive them as thoughts. I perceive them as moods a day. I can go through all of the bardos in a day. I could just be in a bardo in a day. You know what I mean? I
Right,
feel like
absolutely.
it's kind of a place where consciousness is set adrift. And the
My
hungry
friends and
ghost.
I, real quick, I'll
Go
tell you, because I think this is fairly common, but my friends and I just kind of instinctually, when we started experimenting with psychedelics and talking more about mysticism and stuff like out of high school, we all called that, you know, that loop you get into on a psychedelic where you're just stuck in that mind frame and you can't get out. We all called that Bardo.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And thankfully, you know, I always had flashes of it, and don't get me wrong, I had some rough times on trips, but I never got locked in a loop. But I saw people literally like locked in hypnotic loops at some points. You know, like psychedelics can be powerful, and that state of an archetypal bardo is
Right.
definitely a very real thing.
Yeah, and I feel that, you can transpose that to, brain chemistry as the other, kind of ripping you through different bardos.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like the whole wheel of reincarnation, it doesn't just encapsulate like a soul throughout or in between lifetimes and all that. Like we go through many lives and incarnations just in our own, just in this vehicle, this body here.
Yeah, just today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, I guess my fascination. So I've been working on a long form fiction for a really long time, about like 10, 12 years, concerning the solo output Dakota Slim that I've had since I was a kid. I chose that name because of a Frankie and Annette beach movie, Beach Blanket Bingo, because the stooge in it, who ends up being one of my favorite character actors of all time. But my introduction to him was this guy named South Dakota Slim. And in a Frankie and Annette movie, he's this overacting, just kind of brilliant, creepy, grim, brooding presence that wants to kidnap Annette and grind her on a conveyor belt. And I would feel shitty if I wasn't being productive when I was a kid. So I still am a huge cinephile. So I'd always write notes of like what interested me. And I just remember writing Dakota Slim, and like macabre and light. And that was kind of another, part of the polarities there. But the reason why I bring that up is because I have been working under Dakota Slim as like my solo kind of entity or this character so long that it's kind of become a different prism. And it's become a different like prism in and of itself so much that I want him to die, with all due respect. And I mean that, like I want to lay him to rest, but
you're like you become like the Incredible Hulk now. Like you Bruce and the Hulk are just not getting along. I feel you though, man. Yeah, and I think that's a very powerful way.
Neurotic Hulk.
No, but I
but
think that's a very powerful way to look at it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so at the time, this was, parallel to a lot of as you are, right, when you're into a lot of these facets, theology is a huge one, and any kind of spiritual belief is a fantastic wealth of beauty. Any of them,
Hmm.
even the worst, has some, has some light in them. But
Hmm.
I was really taken by the Bardos because I was reading the Bardo Thodol at the time, and I was working as a sound engineer, and it's all about hearing through the Bardos, and I was working on psychoacoustics at the time, and I thought that maybe I could. There's this how do I put it? There's like this highway or this a direct tether, a direct line, like a two cans on a string, where psychoacoustically I could speak to Dakota Slim and ask, like, how do we move on? Like, what do we do? And through a lot of like meditative practice and reading through the Bardo, I found myself almost like meditating, trying to converse with, this part of me, um, through a plane of existence. And I kept seeing, they're the Preda, or the hungry ghosts in the Bardo Thodol, are kind of described as tiny necked and big bellied, never
Hmm.
satiated, unable to quench kind of whatever they're into. And at that time, I was I was voracious, not only in knowledge but also in excess, right? The polarities again. And I remember thinking, like, this is my, this is my Preda Bardo that I'm existing in right now. Like, I am a hungry ghost. And with that, the way to commune with that and the way to like sully the, just the abandon and the unquenchable, like never satisfied, always hungry part of me, was to start working on a long form fiction about Dakota Slim's demise, who, he passes away in the beginning of the book, passes away, like, I'm respectful of his, you know, passed away. No, dude fucking dies in the beginning of the book. And, and it's based around like my history in New Mexico, but, in the late 1800s, and he battles through the bardos of the afterlife.
Oh, wow.
And this has been kind of my great white whale. I've been working on it, notepads and notepads and notebooks for years and years and years, because the hungry ghost is still in me about what I'm not finished with him with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not really a lot, like, I'm still working out how to end it so we can both move on, but we keep being unsatiated about um a certain record or a certain song or a certain, like, haven't hit those marks yet. And that has made me realize over time that, like, I think our base axes as human beings is almost hungry ghosts, especially in this society. I don't think naturally, maybe we would be, but I think in the fits and spurts of our all the cadences around us, and, with everything happening around us, it has almost kind of attuned us into living in the realm of the preta, whether we are sometimes or whether we're faced with them every day. And I think if one was to like really look into the metaphorical symbology of the hungry ghost, they're not nefarious, they're not malicious. They're hungry, and there's a sorrow to them, and
Hmm.
it's this hole never being filled. You know, uh, everyone's got a hole that isn't filled. Don't quote me on that, but
um,
you know, and
so
so that has been my big translation with that, and that has been haunting me along, because I feel myself in my most kind of discombobulated days. So, like, when it's always something that I am lacking. And it's like, why? Why does it need to be something that I'm lacking? So it's this hard wiring I'm trying to get myself out of, especially with this practice.
Yeah, man. It truly, I think this is like the truest definition of a haunting. And if we're getting a little further out there, I think that a lot of like westernized paranormal activity, as I've said before in other places, stems from this kind of phenomena that we're talking about here. Just the disillusion process, the alchemical process. And in that turmoil, when you're at the bottom and you're trying to tinker with these things, and you're like dusting off the workbench of your mind and trying to remember what all this shit means and what all the formula you used to have were, and you start burning yourself and causing bubbles and shit like that,
Yeah, that's when you imprint yourself, and that's when you echo.
Yeah.
As a ghost.
Yeah. And I'm glad you used like echo and resonance again, because I keep forgetting to mention it. I've always used the term like inertia, the forward momentum that a falling thing has.
Total sense.
Yeah. And but I love your psychoacoustics allegory that is going on there. And that's the thing that I love about like esotericism in general, where you can, from the philosophies of the micro and macrocosm, and understanding symbolism and how things interact with each other, you can see the comparisons between something like acoustics and psychology, or astrophysics and neurology,
Right.
things like
And
that.
what is the common thread if we were to distill all of those things? It's energy, it's electrical, So and the transference, I think, is the key, is like how this energy dissipates, or how it is changed, or how it is moved. And I don't mean energy in the woo-woo sense. I almost kind of mean literally
Right.
energy,
So
electrical resonance, right? So it's super fascinating to think about when you kind of distill it all, that some could be trapped in this feedback loop. To pony back what I was saying earlier, like this inherent resonance we all have, the hungry ghost in us is the one that is eating itself. It's the Ouroboros. It's the feedback loop. It is creating the dissonance. Don't get me wrong. I love dissonance, but that's, you know what I mean. Like the very literal and by definition dissonance of being absolutely, out of sorts and out of scheme with the self.
for sure. So definite point made, and poignant about like hungry ghosts being us archetypally representing a hungry ghost. But is Dakota Slim like your hungry ghost?
No, I think it's broader, and I think that was the realization.
Got
I
you.
think
I
it's
see.
dispersed, it's like siphoned the ghost gas and put it into different vehicles, and I think that's a
Interesting.
way to kind of make it not so feedback oriented. That's the only way I can really suss those things out, because given enough time, or given enough room to just focus on one, that's when the mic starts hearing itself.
I really love how genuinely meta the whole thing is, man. Is it has that Grant Morrison kind of feel of him making comic book characters like self-aware of them being in their own comic books, and self-aware of the chaos magic processes that created them. And
it is very specific, to a few, obviously, like, you know what? I don't know if I can say that. Obviously, I won't speak in any absolutes or anything, but yeah, when you put it like that, I guess anytime I write a fictionalized story, it's siphoning that ghost gas again. It's not like pulling from the ether so much as like giving to it, if that makes sense.
yeah, that is another fascinating image.
Yeah,
you're really good at painting pictures with the words, for sure, man.
Well, I also there have been times, especially not to get too deep in the weeds with this, but there have been times where experience is proved later in a way,
Hmm.
where through like audiomantic practices and meditations and sound, um, you know, uh, processes, like, yeah, I hate calling it sound sorcery. That's even worse. But that I have had visions of things that I could not explain. I don't think, as a very imaginative person, could have come up with these things. You know what I mean? And then later were to, read up on the one in specifically was the Druge and Zoroastrianism, are these like beasts on the mountain. And I remember when I was doing this audiomancy kind of session in a dimming room at that time. Actually, it was back in 2017, funny enough, but it was in this small cupboard where I had a mattress and an amp and, like, some delay and effects pedals to kind of help swell the sound in there.
Hmm.
And I'd meditate, and like I'd use physical interaction to kind of help churn kind of a psychic engine, and you get into like a rhythm of the dark and kind of breathe with it. And I would, I'd start to see things. Obviously, most of the time it's these wonderful purple tetrahedrons, or you know what I mean? Like things you see when you're like deeply meditative,
Right.
right?
No doubt.
But there's been some that have barked through, and one of them was this like really ghastly, beastly, um I wouldn't say werewolf. It was like so anti-werewolf, but it was still like where a werewolf would be a werewolf, it was still a beast but wasn't a werewolf. I don't know how else to explain it.
Hmm.
Um, it was some sort of werebeast, almost like
Interesting.
yeah, and it's something I would never have thought to bend joints like that, or I would
Wow.
never have thought to, you know, give a certain like cadence to its voice. It felt very outside of myself, and I was in the process this because I record them all on cassette tape, the sessions,
Hmm.
and I was listening back, and I was going through this sound that sounded like this really slow drudge, and it would actually start to make the sound drooge, 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 and
Wow.
I find out later like drooge is, I was flipping through one of my crazy old, kind of esoteric encyclopedias that I have, and just kind of, as you do, taking a night in, flipping through your crazy old esoteric encyclopedias, and
That's how I do it, man.
yeah, yeah, and I found Druj, Druj. I was like, ah, and it was described as a Zoroastrian beast from the hills, and it didn't have the literal like description of it, but its kind of loose definition, made me go,
Oh, yeah.
holy shit, you
Very
know,
synchronous. Yeah, that's
yeah, yeah,
fascinating.
yeah. And like Druge meaning a lie, and it was like, what was I, you know, what did that mean? That sent me through spirals. Like, what?
Yeah, man. All
Yeah,
part of the process. We'll never have all the answers, but you got to keep, you shouldn't be afraid to ask those questions anyway, and experiment
absolutely.
further.
And it's exciting, but I just wanted to illustrate that as it's not always. I don't think from me. Maybe it is. I don't fucking know.
No, I think, yeah, I mean, if I'm just giving my personal opinion, I think that that is a beautiful example of just genuine um mysticism in the modern day, man, because like you could parse hair, you could split hairs and be like, well, it just originate from the mind first, or which came first, the chicken or the egg. But when something so seamlessly lines up like that, um there's been scientific studies that say, like, it's only a matter of time before you think of someone and then they call, like, of all the million thoughts you have and the million things that could be going
Right, of
on. but
course, yeah.
but it doesn't matter. Just the fact that you did think about them and they did call, it doesn't matter if that was just the random statistical chance that happened to land. Like that's still
Absolutely.
chaos theory. That's the flap of the butterfly wing right there.
Well, and two, it happening in general, you're not thinking about the arithmetic of it happening. You're
Right.
thinking, holy shit, it happened.
Yeah,
And I think,
absolutely.
yeah, I think people get lost in that sort of, kind of, those kind of deep twiddles of, of causality. And
Yeah,
yeah,
you're just gonna get lost there if you spend too
yeah,
much time there.
yeah. But yeah, I still very much, work within those processes as you were talking about, synchronous, the haunt manual, like I started it in September. I released the first chapter, which is a big overview of, I think you asked me what hauntomancy was like an hour ago. That's hilarious. I just realized that. Um,
I
so
forgot about that
yeah,
too.
hauntomancy is a cheeky term just to kind of marry when I'm considering the hauntology, the practice of utilizing the hauntology of the self for kind of pragmatic means. So hauntology is this kind of philosophical principle about the kind of retro meets new kind of ghostly uh just ghostly appendage of an arm that kind of sweeps through culture that you see skipping every couple of generations, and it shows up again, and it's just this weird cyclical uh nostalgia bait, kind of weird pop culture phenomenon,
Hmm.
in the sense of, you know, nothing is actually kind of nothing is really new. It's all kind of artifacts and scaffolding from, the ruins of what was before. And that's a horrendous breakdown of what hauntology is, but and the way I'm using it. You know,
Fascinating though.
yeah, but in Jacques Derrida, who wrote about hauntology, um, one of my favorite, not theorems, but just kind of musings by him was something called the pharmacon, and the pharmacon is a kind of a magician's poison, but because they're a magician, it's also an antidote.
Hmm.
So he uses as an example of like it is both, but it is neither. So like a vampire, it's neither living nor dead, it's something else, it's undead, right?
Hmm.
And again, there's the echo, there's the resonance of that third mind, that third point, right on the axis. It's
What would
not
an
either
example?
extreme.
What would example of a pharmacon be? Like a habit or a mentality?
Well, so
Or
that's where the philosophical comes from. Like he
got
was
it.
using it in like pop culture standards, uh, you know, especially when it came to illustrating it very plainly. But to
Interesting.
me, the pharmacon could be magical praxis itself. It is both a poison and an antidote, but it is also, I mean, it's neither poison nor antidote. It's both, which is something new. It's something that
Yeah.
pushes through, right? So
Hmm.
that that's kind of what's spurned me. And what's funny is I actually had a zine in high school called the Pharmacon,
Hmm.
um, and I had forgotten about that. Like, wasn't thinking about it until I was like working with this quote unquote hauntomancy. And forgive me if I don't call it a hauntomancy. Like, it's just a kind of an easy word just to drive home the point that there's a hauntological aspect of this magical praxis, but
Absolutely.
it really is about the hauntology of the self, about these reoccurring specters, these effervescent, like, I don't know, just cyclical, gases that come up, through your life, these weird echoes, these weird resonances, like these weird disillusions of things. And it's to me, I started getting really. I had this meditation, and I use this like a meditation of the stuff I wrote that I've been using for years. That kind of, you kind of traverse through the nine spheres or whatever, in this very kind of self-guided meditation. But when I was doing it, which I hadn't done it in a while, I saw, um, I, I, the way I visualize it. So there's this whole process you go through in this meditation, but really you kind of, not you, the royal you, climb out of this space, like this embryonic space, and
Hmm.
you find yourself at the base of, a large tree, right? Obviously. Um, but it's, the way I saw it was, a deadwood, not a deadwood, a bloodwood tree
Hmm.
that was profusely bleeding, and there's marigold, petals falling everywhere. And, it seemed like a dissolution. It seemed like an autumn, even in this space. And I get out and I notice that I am a silhouette of myself. But not only that, that there's actually, upon closer inspection, that there's nebulas and galaxies kind of built within me. You know, some are brighter than others, but very, not, I wouldn't say absolutely faint, but noticeable. And I get out of this pool, which, when I look back, it ends up being my, birthmarked eye is where I climbed out of. So, trippy stuff. I'll try to skip through that stuff. But
Dude, I am, Dad, this is very rich symbolism. I'm fascinated.
yeah. And so I get out and I'm ready to peruse the spheres as I've known them. I learned that there's back roads and there's easy ways. You know, I can skip the forever growing on top of itself, greenery. I can skip the, you know, the mother's, womb. I can skip the man shooting light on his eyes and screaming that dimension. You know what I mean? I was like, there are some
Right.
spheres I don't need to go into, and I found out tricks and ways to kind of get around it, like, speakeasy kind of tunnels. And
I like the sound of that.
I'm about to embark, thinking like, all right, here we go again. Uh, know which one not to go into. I look over and I see four of me, separated only by the, I would say, the amplitude of light of within their silhouettes, their darkened silhouettes. So they got darker. I'm sorry, they got lighter as the silhouettes were further away from me. And there were four of them. And funny enough, I was a little bit lighter than the one next to me.
Hmm.
But it got, he was the darkest. And I say he because I'm assuming it's me, but who knows? But, and then it moved, obviously. But and then it moved, it cascaded up. And I remember feeling like I knew the arithmetic of that. And it was like how I saw me and how I subjugated, how I allow time linearly. Like, so these were the 5 years that I had been living.
Wow.
And it, you know, and I, you know what I mean? It's like when you're in those places, you just kind of know. It's not like I'm pulling out a pad and paper and going like, all right, so what's your name? What are you doing here? It's
Believe me,
just,
I get it, dude, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And so there was an arithmetic, I knew about it. And I remember feeling sad because I remember, well, that makes sense. The one next to me, it being last year, very, very dim. Like it was a hard year. Um, Still pretty dim the year before that. Maybe progressively lighter, and then kind of really bright, like fervent. And I remember feeling like the constellations in me were like, well, the only way to get brighter is to kind of engulf them. So they would, they would walk into me, and I would kind of absorb them. And when it came to the last one, I remember a very sentimental feeling. It was like kind of like you're about to embark on this huge expedition, but the relationship that you were in, nothing bad happened. It's just one of those things where roads are diverged, and you're moving away from each other. There was like a sorrow about it. And we had a
Wow.
moment, and then you know walked into me, or walked into the spectral me, or whatever. And I remember slowly making my, I didn't even want to go up or traverse the tree, because I felt like why do it if you're gonna cheat all the time? Sometimes you gotta, you gotta hit Malkuth, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though it sucks. And I felt like a lot of guilt. It was almost like the 5 years ago version of me was, you know, giving me some sort of like, what are you doing, dude? Really? This is what you've been. No wonder, things are out of whack. And when I woke up from the I do this meditation in the shower, because it's like sound is a big proponent, and it helps me drown everything. And I feel embryotic when I'm in the
No doubt.
in the shower. But I remember waking up and like kind of crying and thinking, my first thought was like, is this what a baptism feels like? It's like this sorrowful deliverance of, now I know what I got to do. Now I have a kind of a game plan of what to atone for. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's what spurned this whole chapter of then me doing these audiomancy rituals where I'm systematically using notes and instruments, and all improvised, in a live 40-minute set that I've been streaming too. Um, all very intricately, placed and poised. This is from that person in 2017. I got this here. I'm going to play the key of this, of that album that I wrote then. Like, I don't know how to play those songs anymore, but it's just going to be improvised. And it was like doing that built these synapses back to who I was during that time. And I start to remember songs that I had long since forgotten, or like, lost a recording or a demo of. And I was like, wow, I'm like building synapses back to that era. And then soon after, out of nowhere, I was poised to just like keep teaching wilderness survival up here. I get a phone call going, we can't keep you up there, even though you've signed a lease and all that. We need you down in Oregon. Back at the organization that you worked at the last time was in 2017, and we need you basically to stay while you get on your feet, in hopes of relocating, at the house where I met my now girlfriend, um,
Huh. How about
at a
that?
on a Halloween party in
Wow.
2017.
All right.
Yeah.
Full
And so
circle.
that's what starts that journey, was being thrust back. I consider it like this. It's like time travel is probably just not possible for our consciousness, since we're just so linearly aimed. But like, you don't have to travel back in time, but you can be placed back in the quadrants, and like whatever's still there that tethers, you know what I mean?
I
It's
think
like,
intuition is largely the tether that binds there.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, just being back at the organization, staying at the house where this my journey started with my significant other, um, you know, back in Portland, which I hadn't been back to in that way. There was a lot of, I was there to resolve some things,
Hmm.
with myself, with others, you know. And so that's kind of where I was. Um, Long story short, I was able to work through it for a month and kind of forgave myself about things, like mended relationships in that month. It was like this huge closure principle. And it was almost as if when I did that, this other opportunity knocked and said, okay, you come back to Seattle now. We've got an even better job for you. And it was from a different organization and a different field, but one that I've always worked in, which is sound design and stuff. Um, you need to start on Monday. So I quit. I told my organization that I had been working with for like 8 years, like, I'm sorry, my time here is done. Like, I did it. The freaking silhouette ghost galaxy dude has high fived my heart. It's time to go. You know? And so I quit, left on Saturday, came back this Sunday, had a full week, doing this new gig in this new fucking reality tunnel. And that is because of fucking Hauntomancy.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. I really appreciate you going into that detail there, because I think you man, like it's a very eclectic thing that we're trying to express and that we're trying to explain here. And I think that when you can sort of relay it with your own story in the best ways possible, sometimes that's like the only best way. And that's kind of why mythology was so pervasive, is the humanizing grand concepts so
Or
that we could wrap our
perverse.
heads around them. Or perverse, absolutely. Speaking of the Halloween
Wow.
season. So I'm gonna have to let you go here soon, man, because
I
I'm gonna
know,
be
man. Did you see how I tried to like rally that last bit up right before 5?
yeah, dude, you nailed it. You nailed it, buddy. And for those listeners out there, I am going to a haunted house after this with some people, so that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that. But you got to get into the Halloween spirit a little bit. And seriously, if you folks out there haven't watched any horror movies yet this season, you're fucking up. You need to start get in the mindset.
You done goofed.
Yeah, man. Because I mean, hey, if it's not your cup of tea, you don't have to go. You don't have to go full gore. Get a little bit into the Halloween mode though, because like I said at the beginning of this episode, there's a reason for it. There's a time and a place, and so I encourage that.
And even ghosts dissolve. Like, even Halloween's gonna be gone in a short time.
Amen, man. Amen. So tell people, Keats, where they can, because Haunt Manual, if we didn't make it totally clear, it's not only written work, but it's also a podcast where you're reading it and it's got your music in the background, and it's a great thing. So tell people where they can find it, where they can find you and keep up with you, and any closing comments you got for us.
I would say the easiest is just Pragmagick with a K .com. That's got the haunt manual. It's got the YouTube, all the stuff. I do these improvised audiomancy streams, and then, I meditate and work on the literature of the haunt manual. Then I I put that out on Substack, and then I read or recontextualize it with audiomancy as a score to it. Obviously, I'm backed up because freaking Hauntomancy, am I right? Drug me away for a month and a half. But yeah, so, and wethehollow.org, fine collection of witches and weirdos, slither hither. And yeah, all I'd have to say, honestly, Anthony, thank you. You always rule, and it's always a pleasure. Hope you have fun, and I mean this both literally and figuratively. Haunt on.
Amen, dude. Thank you so much. Haunt on to you and all the listeners as well. I hope everyone out there has a fun Halloween season. I'll be back. The final release in October will be Halloween, and then so that we'll get one more Halloween specific geared episode in there,
Nice.
and then we'll be onward from there. And Keats, will definitely be having you back on soon, my man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, dude. Always my pleasure, and appreciate you, man.
Likewise. Everybody, you take care out there. Don't forget, this is Black Hoodie Alchemy. I'm Anthony Tyler. We've been talking with Keats Ross of Pragmagick. Y'all take care out there. We'll see you next time.